My name is Kate Davis. I am originally from Athens, Georgia, so I grew up there. I now, of course, live in Wichita, and I am a part of the gathering. I help with music. I help with preaching. I consider myself a lay pastor for the service. I do all sorts of different things. So I have an older sister. Two parents, obviously, who are together. We were a family together. My family is really great. I can't say enough about how privileged I am that my parents are very functional. My family is very functional. They're smart, they're kind. I always knew that they loved me. They're very supportive. The things that I complained about as a child were that I wasn't allowed to watch TV on weekdays. Or drink Coca-Colas on weekdays and that kind of thing. So I had a really good childhood that shaped me in a lot of ways. So, I think a lot about the schools that I went to. I went to public schools in Georgia. So they were very diverse and gave me a lot of interesting experiences. In a lot of ways, that I don't think a lot of people get in other places. I mean, it meant a lot to me. And I also grew up in a church that was often in conflict, which I think was really good for me because I loved people at my church who were very conservative and people at my church who were very progressive. And we all kind of managed to be in a church community together. Basically, I've worked for the last 10 years or so in politics. So I've done various things from working in the Kansas State House with the Kansas legislature. I've worked on campaigns, both in Kansas and other parts of the country. I've done everything from fundraising to committee monitoring to campaign managing, and currently do some work with the state helping to just work with state agencies and make sure that things are going well. I've always been somewhat political. So I was the founder of the High School Young Democrats at my high school in Georgia, and we did voter registration drive and that kind of thing. And then what I did professionally getting out of high school and in college, I got a degree in theater. So I was a stage manager. So I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and then I went to New York City and joined the Stage Managers Union and did the whole thing. And then had kind of a series of things happen, including the death of one of my high school friends, and really had kind of a reckoning and decided that I wanted to do more and I wanted to save the world and figure out how to do that. I decided that that wasn't it for me. And so I actually, I found a position with Habitat for Humanity as an AmeriCorps in Wichita. And so I had family in Wichita. My mom was from Kansas. And I'd been doing set construction. So I was I'll go build houses. This is great. And Georgia is of course where Habitat for Humanity was founded. And so I went to where they started and I was this is it. This is what I'm gonna do. And so I did. And I came out and I did a year of Habitat for Humanity construction on the job site, working with volunteers. I have built 40 houses, been involved in some part of the process of constructing those. And I loved it. And I thought I was gonna go do another year with a Habitat somewhere on the West Coast because I hadn't lived there yet or something like that. And I fell in love with Wichita in large part because of this church community, which at the time was called Next, that I found and became really invested in. And so I decided to stick around. I did another year with Interfaith Ministries, and then I kind of came to a point where I saw three paths ahead of me. Either continuing to do nonprofit work, investing in political work, because I had started volunteering and then gotten involved in some campaigns and that kind of thing, or really going down the path pastoring, ministering, like church work. And so I went to get a master's in theological studies. When I started, I was going to get a master's in divinity from Isla School of Theology, because I thought that really applies for all three of those paths. And then kind of a few different things happened. I got fired from a job that was a nonprofit job that wasn't going great. And I had an opportunity in the political space. And it became really clear to me that that's the direction that I wanted to go. And so that's where I've been since then. I think that the most kind of consequential and defining thing about my life actually has been the gathering. I mean, to this point in my life, and really when I think about like what it means to have found somewhere that I belong and something that gives me joy and something that makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing. Also, my work has been really important, and I love the work that I do, and it feels like it's my purpose in life and that kind of thing. But there's nothing that's defining in quite the way that this service and these people and these relationships and this community have been. I mentioned a friend of mine from high school died, and I've talked about this some in church, especially coming into the Advent season, because there was a group of girls at my high school who were all very close. They grew up together, and I wasn't in the group, but I was friends with them and that kind of thing. One of them in 2008 was murdered. And just very suddenly kidnapped, like took her out of her house, took money out of the ATM and then shot her. And she was like beautiful and smart and kind and wonderful. And I had done academic team with her in high school and just loved her. And so that was incredibly impactful to me in my life. One of her friends, who was also a friend of mine, jumped off her roof very suddenly. And so that happened on Veterans Day. So we just passed the anniversary of that. And then just this past year, another one of those girls died. And so, that it's one of those things that it feels like too much tragedy in one space. And for a while there, it was like one after another, and it was just so hard. And also like my heart breaking for these other girls that I was so close with to know that they've lost now. You get these pictures of them in groups as kids, and like half of those girls are dead, and it's so hard. And so that was something that was really hard for me to deal with. That mostly happened many, many years ago. And then I also think about, and God, I don't know when this was, but there was a point where in the span of a week, so Breonna Brown, who just left the church, her cousin committed suicide. And my cousin's baby was stillborn. And the executive director of the nonprofit that I was working at the time was found dead in her home. Like, all in a week. And I just, like, those are the times that just, like, knock you out. And I mean, like, and it kind of gives me this, like, sometimes I start to think about it, and I'm like, it's been a long time since any of those things have happened to me. What's coming? Because it's so much, and then you just like, you figure out a way to move on. Like, and you figure out a way to carry it with you, and live into it. After Eve died, who's the one who was killed, I found this quote in a book that was, I think it's Henry James or something. And the quote is, feel for all you're worth. And even if it half kills you, for it's the only way to do justice to these beings who are our pride and our inspiration. And it's really easy to try not to feel. Like, it's really easy to try and put things away. And I think one of the things that I learned from all of that is like to lean into it and to allow yourself to feel whatever it is, like as things come by, because you are carrying all of those people with you, and you're carrying your feelings about it, and you're carrying your grief, and you're carrying what they've left you. And so, part of the responsibility that I feel, and I feel this too about, my grandparents have all died. They all died when I was in high school or earlier. All of these people in our lives, like the cloud of witnesses that we talk about, what does it mean to live a life that does justice to their memory? When I think about like things that make me happy or proud in my life, I think about the kinds of people that I'm surrounded with. And I think about I'm so blessed to be able to call these folks my friends, and the kinds of people who will stand by me and who give me advice and who tell me when I'm wrong and all of that stuff. I really have really good people. And that's, I think about when my parents look at me, what makes them proud, or when I have, I don't have my own kids, but the friends' kids and that kind of thing, what are the things that I want for them when they're in their 20s or they're in their 30s? And I think if they are surrounded by the kinds of people that I have, then I will be really happy for them. So I love to cook and bake. Food, always food. And that's really, I was thinking about this because Les was talking about being outside, that he was like, it's not that being outside is necessary for my mental health, but it's like, if I'm not doing that, then my mental health is not in a good place. And that is how baking is for me. It's not that, and it is it's therapeutic, it's good for me. It's an interesting thing to do, and it takes my mind off of stuff. But it's also if I'm not baking, then I might not be in a good place. And I also I do a lot of crafting stuff. I knit and I cross stitch and I do some calligraphy and I all of that kind of stuff, which all brings me joy. Yeah, so it's an interesting story because it's definitely one of those things that you look back at your life and you're like, wow, all of that fell into place. Okay, so when I was in high school in Georgia, I went to a spiritual retreat called Chrysalis. That's part of a thing called the Walk to Emmaus, and it's a weekend retreat and you learn about God, and it was very impactful for me. I really enjoyed it. And so I came to Wichita, and I have no clue why, but I thought to myself, maybe I should see if I could volunteer and help a Chrysalis group, a flight. And so I sent a random email that was hey, I'd be happy to volunteer on this, whatever. And they called me and they said, we would love to have you. Also, the person who usually does the talk about singleness is not available for this one. We don't know anything about you. Is that something you can talk about? Yes, that is something that I can talk about. And so I ended up going and leading a table and giving the talk on singleness. And through that, the girl who usually gave the singleness talk, I don't know if she became available, but she was also on the flight. Her name is Casey Long, and we became friends. And it was it was maybe just after Christmas. It was the weekend between Christmas and New Year's. And so, at the end of it, she wrote me a note that was so I thought she was saying, meet me at a coffee shop on Sunday night. And I was like, sure, we can meet and have coffee and hang out. And because I remember I was texting her and I was like, can we meet at 6:30 instead of 6? And then she was like, no, it's a church service. It starts at 6. And I was like, okay. So I showed up and I might have been a little late. And they sang Come Thou Fount, which is one of my favorite hymns. And it was Josh and Brianna and Matthew Morrison and Savannah Smith. She had a different name then. Anyway, all doing stuff. And then Josh Melker was like, we are making breakfast for the homeless shelter. And it starts, like, I think it started the next day. So it was like, if you want to show up at 6 a.m. on Monday, we're going to feed the homeless. And I was like, count me in. And there it went from there. So then I got to know everybody and hung out there and became a part. And then eventually brought my cello back from my parents' house so that I could start playing cello and that was January of 2010. So almost 12 years ago.
Yeah, so little did you know.
Yeah, and then like I said before, it's become the defining thing of my adult life in a lot of ways. But isn't it crazy, just to think about, if I hadn't just had that thought, if I hadn't sent the email, if I hadn't got, so many things that had to fall in place that ended us up where we are now. So my faith journey is very boring. I grew up in church, I continued to go to church, and I still go to church. I shifted from a mainline Protestant church to a mainline Methodist church. There's not a lot of, I don't have any conversion moments. And I never hit rock bottom with drugs and alcohol and whatever, and then turned around. I will say, so that means that the shape of my story is very different from, I think, one that a lot of people tell often. I actually hate to say I've never hit rock bottom, because I do think, I don't know if it's the same. I think it's probably wrong to talk about them in the same way. But my experience of sin is being mean, thinking I'm better than people, being cut off from people, being cut off from God, and those kinds of things. And I think that those are just as bad, right? And they're internal instead of external, which makes them harder to kind of identify and process and for other people to see or whatever. But there was, a lot of time when I was a child that I described myself as insufferable. I thought I was smarter than everybody else, and I thought I knew better than everybody else, and I was not that nice in a lot of ways. And that, I think those things are I still have plenty of flaws, but my faith journey is a lot about working on myself and about loving other people and seeing the value in other people. And the moments that I've had that have been really impactful to me spiritually are the moments when other people have loved me, particularly in spite of that, or not even knowing. So I talked about going on this chrysalis flight, and therethere's this moment where you suddenly see all of the people who helped this weekend happen, and you have this experience, and you've got people making food and cleaning toilets and praying for you and all of these things. And it was really meaningful to me. The idea that these people don't know me and they are giving up part of their life and part of their emotional, they're committing something to me just out of a kind of genuine love. And that too, there are times when I am in bad places and my friends are willing to be honest with me, but are still around, right? And so those are the things that's what's meaningful to me, is the idea of a love that is unconditional and a God who wants us to give that to one another.